tenants complain about poor social housing in England have jumped 43% in a year. We're going to read into this more from The Guardian, you guys. So it says the Ombudsman made 26,901 interventions to put things right, including a child's bedroom windows boarded up for 4 years. 4 years, guys. How has this been allowed to happen? We know that the Conservatives did lots of austerity and they cut back a lot of things, but we're talking about like some of these have been in these conditions for years. So while it's easy to say, oh, well, Labour need to do something about this, and you're absolutely right, Labour government should be doing something about this, but we have to remind ourselves that a lot of this poor social housing was left like this, with whether it's bad landlords or whether it's the council not taking ownership responsibility, whether it's what the government is doing to make sure people are living in suitable conditions, because it's really, really unacceptable for people to live in poor housing conditions. I mean, this is England. This is not, with the greatest respect, we're not supposed to be a poor country. We're supposed to be known as a rich nation, one of the wealthiest nations in the world. And yet somehow we still find ourselves finding them in some of the most horrible conditions that they've been treated in. Worse than even animals in some places. Like, that's how terrible this is. This should not be happening. Landlords should be held to account. I've mentioned before, time and time again, how terrible there are some really nasty, terrible landlords. There are a few good ones out there, but the overall majority, a lot of them are just bad, looking just to milk people for every single penny they got. And when it comes to actually looking after their needs, making sure that the homes that they're in are suitable up to a certain standard, a lot of them are just, if they can get away with it, they're going to try and get away with it. Because not every tenant knows about all their rights as well, which is also a big problematic as well. But 26 interventions to put things right. And we're talking, and even including a child's bedroom here. It's bad enough when we're talking about adults, or we're talking about pregnant women, but we're even talking about children and the conditions that they are living in. That's not right. That's not the kind that's not something that we should be, any child in England should be being raised in. It's unacceptable, and we should be doing something about this. We need to be making sure that all children have a suitable accommodation with their families. I can't stress that enough, and I'm sure most of you who are watching this will agree with me on that. So let's read more into this to get a better understanding, you guys. So complaints from social housing tenants about poor living conditions have risen by more than 40% in England, according to the latest report from the Housing Ombudsman, including a case in which a child's bedroom window was boarded up for 4 years. The Housing Ombudsman Service made 7,082 decisions on complaints from tenants to social landlords about the lack of repairs and other failings, including antisocial behaviour in the year to March 31st. Now, this is obviously problematic, antisocial behaviour. And when people are living in poor conditions, that's what else that can lead towards the antisocial behaviour as well. So this was up 30% from the previous year, public body said in its annual complaints review. So this is going up as well, which is not what we want. There was a 43% increase in complaints about poor property conditions, far above the overall rise in investigations. The Ombudsman made 26,901 interventions to put things right, with 40% of compensations awarded related to leaks, damps, and moulds. This is one of the things that is really, really really unhealthy for people living in accommodation in places where there's leaks, damps, and mold that can make them more vulnerable, more sick, more possibly catch diseases and whatnot, which means that they become a burden on the NHS because of that as well. Which is why we need to deal with this crisis, because again, it's another problem that becomes a burden for the NHS as well. This is like, we talked about how a lot of problems with the NHS is linked to other things as well, such as the cost of living crisis. And this is another example of something that is linked to people, why they ended up in hospital, in the hospitals in the first place, because of things like this. The findings were grim. One household in Manchester lived for 2 years with empty bin bags covering a hole in their living room ceiling, with the risk of asbestos. This is horrifying. Asbestos is very dangerous, and it can be potentially fatal as well. In London, a resident lived for 3 years without functioning heating and hot water in a separate case. And in a hot water and heating, how has this been allowed to happen? Why has this been allowed to happen? And in a separate case, a child had their bedroom boarded up for 4 years. The family complained that this allowed no light into the room, but a drought was coming in. They also expressed concerns about the security of the window. And the thing is that temperatures obviously fluctuate and change. Like, how are you supposed to protect yourself from like if there's a storm outside, or when it's really, really hot or really, really cold? You just can't protect yourself from that if you haven't even got a proper boarded up window. In another case in London, a wheelchair user was unable to access her bedroom and bathroom for 2 years because the doorways were not wide enough. Why? How has this not been addressed? The Ombudsman ordered £5.4 million in compensation to tenants, with the average amount of compensation per case falling to £947 to £1,151, suggesting improvements to the redress offered by landlords in their own process, it said. There were some tentative signs of improvements as the overall I cannot say that word, guys, apologies. Manamistum rate, which measures all failings that affect residents, fell to 71%, was down from 73% the year before, or 10,235 cases. The severe malmistimation rate decreased to 5%, down from 7%, the most serious failings, as those cases fell by 117 to 714. There were 120 landlords against whom 75% or more of the complaints were upheld. There was also 131 landlords that received at least one finding of severe malmisceration. I can't say that word, guys. I do apologise. London-based L&Q, which is one of the country's largest housing associations, had the most severe malmiscerations findings, 77, followed by Lambeth Council with 40 and Peterborough Trust with 34. Richard Blakeway, the Housing Ombudsman, said acute pressures remain for some social landlords, with a negative impact on the lives of some residents. There are reoccurring lessons across thousands of complaints, which, if addressed, could prevent future service failure. This review shows the first signs of the sector complaint handling improving. This is from a high failure rate and focus that cannot be diverted. Still, it shows that some things are starting to work. Blakeway had previously warned that simmering anger at poor housing conditions could turn into social tensions. Yeah, because people will get frustrated. It puts people in a negative light when they're living in uncomfortable and terrible conditions, and they can end up taking those emotions out on other people, which have no bearing. It's just not good for. It's not good physically. It's not good for you mentally. Never mind just your health as well. And this is another factor leads into why many people are suffering from mental health as well. The report said that 16 landlords significantly improved their performances this year. That's good. And there were two landlords, North Devon Homes and Pickering and Ferron Homes, against whom several complaints were received, but investigations found no failings. Spokesperson for the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government said it is good that progress has begun, but there is more to be done. Landlords cannot be allowed to rent out dangerous homes and shamelessly put the lives of their tenants at risk. Our new laws will force them to fix problems quickly so that our people are safe in their homes and can be proud to live in social housing. Arab's Law, named after 2-year-old Arab Shah, who was killed by mould in a social housing flat in Rochdale in 2020, came into force on the 27th of October and requires landlords to make certain emergency repairs within 24 hours, including tackling mould and damp. However, the government has been criticised for delaying the full implementation of the legislation until 2027. That's not good. When the full implementation hasn't been got in, so some landlords are probably getting away with it a bit more than they should be there. However, obviously it is good to see that there is some progress being made in some parts here, as we saw from this piece, but nowhere near the levels that need to be done here. We still have many tenants, many people who are living in abhorrent conditions, and we need action to be taken to them. More needs to be done, and it's not fair for them. There's all sorts of reasons why people in certain conditions living in these accommodations, but it is down to the landlords to take ownership and responsibility for them. Now, some people may argue that landlords may not always have all the control, or it may be the case that the landlords may not have all the money. Well, my position on those landlords who try to justify leaving tenants in these situations is that if you cannot run it, if you cannot give appropriate accommodation for people in the housings that you own, then sell it up, is my response, because let someone else do it properly so that these people can live in suitable conditions. Because it's unfair and unjust that people are living in terrible, disgusting conditions, come home to them. It's not right that people feel the need that to come home feeling depressed and sad, rather than they actually feel better about themselves going to work than they do being at home, where their home is supposed to be their comfort, their personal space, and yet it's nothing more than a mouldy, damp, with holes everywhere, and themselves being put at risk, health risk, both and mentally as well. All these things add up to people living in these kinds of accommodations. But what do you guys think? What do you guys make of the situation when it comes to social housing in England? Is the Labour government doing enough? Are there signs that they are cracking on this? Let me know your thoughts and more down in the comment section below. If you found this video interesting and informative, please hit that like button and share it across social media. Subscribe if you haven't already. Do check out Rumble and Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. And if you got to the end of the video, type Pingu in the comments below. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.